Hello and welcome back to the channel to another of my interviews. Today, talking to a gentleman about stress. We've been living in quite fearful times over the last few years. You may well have been aware of it. We've been told to do things that we never thought we'd have to do. It's been quite stressful coming back out into the world and trying to navigate our way through bits and pieces. And still the government are pushing in to us or giving us things that we may or may not agree with. Or it may be just that work is full of stress and the need to earn a living is becoming harder and harder. So how do we deal with stress? Well, Gary Paul Williams is a man who runs a YouTube channel and discusses all of these things. He's into hypnotherapy and something called neuro-linguistic programming, which I have heard about but don't really know too much about, so we'll find out a bit about that. He's also, curiously, had a near-death experience, so lots to get into. So, Gary, lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me.
It's nice to be here with the legend in his own lifetime.
That's very kind of you to say so.
Yeah,
I'm recently back from my band, so in a way I feel it's like a near-death experience in terms of on YouTube.
yeah.
So it is quite stressful having those sort of things. So I'm very much looking forward to understanding stress. So tell us how you got into all of this. Were you always interested in stress and that sort of thing?
Well, I won't go too far back into my history because it does go quite a way back. I'm 62 in May. But I was involved in broadcasting many years ago, and one of the sort of naughty broadcasters as well, which was called pirate radio back in the old days.
Oh, yes.
Whether you recall that. But
Well, yeah, I recall it. I can't really remember actually myself being under the bed with the transistor radio like you hear so many people used to do.
that's where I got my rebellious nature from, I think. And
Excellent.
part of the reasons, why I started up the channel and to help other people, to kind of fight back at the nefarious things that are going on at the moment, and to learn about how their mind, their body, their health overall really works. And knowledge is power, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we do live in stressful times, and it seems to me ever since, I mean, I'm a child of the 60s and 70s growing up, and it seemed very carefree back then. Even when getting a job, it seemed relatively simple and easy. But these days, jobs come with a lot of stress. The society we live in has a lot of stress, and stress starts to work against us on our physical bodies. And most people are, this is a sweeping statement, are not necessarily eating all the right things that would actually enhance their bodies. And they're also choosing pharmaceuticals which they may not actually need. So there's a lot against us at the moment. How do we deal with this stress, Gary?
Well, it's strange, isn't it, that we go to the gym to try and improve our muscles and our health, and we also, we're lucky enough to know about the right food to eat and everything else, which was a big thing for me in relation to my heart attacks and things like that. If we're lucky enough to get some good instruction on that, then that's going to help us, isn't it? But we don't tend to do anything about our stress levels. We just,
Mm.
it's something we have to kind of put up with, isn't it, in that respect?
And sometimes they say, oh, bit of stress, it's all good for you. And then other times you'll hear them say, oh no, too much stress, that's bad. So, we're always being given these mixed messages, and you don't quite know what is good and then what isn't good.
Yeah, and I have to explain the difference because stress can be a good thing.
Right.
An example, many years ago, Shirley and I, my wife, we went to South Africa and we wanted to see all the different animals, what do they call it, the big five or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the lions and everything else. We were lucky enough to see most of those animals, but Shirley was really disappointed that she didn't see an elephant.
Right.
So we're driving, in the outback there and driving along, and she's complaining about the fact she hasn't seen an elephant and looking straight forwards. And I can see to the side that this elephant is charging towards us.
Oh,
And I'm shouting out, elephant, elephant. And she's not paying any attention to me. And then suddenly she realized and put the car in reverse. And we backed up as fast as we possibly could to get away from this charging elephant. So you can see that stress sometimes is actually a good thing because it
Yes.
gets you out of the way when
Yes.
you need to get out of the way from the danger that's heading for you.
So
So
if
we,
it's a very short period of stress, your reaction is to, run and get out of danger. But if it's more prolonged, like on a daily basis, as some people work under a lot of stress to achieve certain goals.
and that's when it wears you down, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like you've got a glass full of stress, and the more stress you pour in, the more it's going to overflow, and then you find that you can't cope. Some people are better at coping than others.
Mm.
And if I explain the difference between stress and anxiety, you may understand that. Basically, anxiety is kind of worrying about, say, the future, or thinking about what you could have done in the past, or maybe there's something in your past which is interfering, and you're dwelling on those things.
Yes.
That's really what anxiety is, whereas stress, as we've just said, is what's happening in the moment right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So the anxiety is something often, we're often told don't worry about it, it may never happen, but we kind of still do. It's very hard to even though you know it might not happen, but
Yeah.
you sometimes we just seem to take on the negative because I don't know quite why. It seems easier to be letting that fester in our head than actually thinking, no, it's all going to go well today in the office, and I've got to, to give this speech or whatever it is, and we just start to worry unnecessarily when we don't think, unless we're super confident that it's all going to go fine, everyone's going to love us at the end of it.
Like all these processes, they're all natural processes that are just trying to keep us safe. So, we try to think ahead, don't we? So we can plan
Mm.
so that if the unexpected comes along, we can deal with that. But we get delusional and we just take it to extremes. And that's why, we have problems staying in the moment. And I'll talk more about that later because it can benefit you to do so, if that makes sense.
Mm. Staying in the moment as opposed to thinking ahead of things that aren't yet
Yeah,
here.
we can make plans, can't we? And make sure, that we haven't got a crystal ball, have we? We can't say that things are definitely going to be a particular way.
Mm.
There was lots of rumors, weren't there, about this emergency signal that was going to happen.
Yes.
Men hiding down holes and all sorts of weird and wonderful things that might have happened when that actually went out to people. And a lot of people that I knew got freaked out by the whole thing.
Yes. There was
So
a lot of hype. There certainly was a lot of hype. A lot of YouTube channels, mine included. I did a little piece about it.
yeah, yeah, and it caused a lot of fear, didn't it, as well? So I wonder why that was as such. But I won't go down the rabbit hole on that one. But
But it is these things sometimes, things are deliberately done to make you frightened, so that you can be manipulated in lots of different ways. I mean, money is something that a lot of people worry about because you may be okay today, but tomorrow you could lose your job, or you may have an unexpected bill, or the car conks down. And as we all sort of live pretty much on the edge of the cliff, and we're coping with everything, and at the end of the day, okay, everything's all right, we can go to bed now, and then the next day is like, oh, am I getting a bit close? Oh no, the car's gone down, need a new washing machine. In my case, one of my computers went down. It's like, oh. And those things can build up and really be stressful. How does all of that affect on our physical health? I mean, other than just worrying about it, does it affect our physical health?
well, it's guaranteed to do that unless you actually take care of it. And I'll go into things in a second. Things like sleep
Mm-hmm.
really is our first line of defense. And if we haven't sorted that out, guess what? You get stressed, don't you? And then if you get stressed and you're anxious, you find you can't sleep.
Yes.
And you can see there's this circle that goes round. So
So
we
how?
need to address those kinds of things. Not only like we were saying about, eating the right food, exercise, which is really important, which helps to relieve stress and anxiety, but also those other aspects as well, including sleep, which is really important.
So tell us, how much sleep should we have?
You should have really. I mean, there's lots of opinions, but 7 to 9 hours really. Now, if you were somebody, say, now you'll like this one. If you were somebody that only has 5 hours sleep, a
Excuse
man, if
me.
you have 5 hours sleep a day, you're going to have smaller testicles than other males.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's, all
Let's
to
just
do
have a
with,
quick check. Oh, yeah, no, we were all right.
we won't go back to the elephant story, but it's so important because we're talking about the human race here,
Mm.
future of the human race. And isn't it strange that all these things are happening at the moment, like these devices, which are extremely bad for us, and especially around sleep, are affecting us and interfering with our natural processes. And that's why that's so important.
So just you just mentioned up these phones and at sleep time. So in what way? The light from it or the frequencies coming in,
Yeah,
the
blue
fact
light.
that they disturb us?
When you're on your computer, a lot of people go to bed last thing at night. They'll check their computer, which if there's anything bad coming up in your emails, whatever, you're now
Mm.
putting yourself under stress before you even get the chance to sleep.
Yes.
And of course, the blue light on top. And also with children, if they're looking at their phones late at night, and at other times really as well, that does affect their fertility. It's been proven now that it does that.
Gosh.
So, that these things we need to know and
Yes,
protect
absolutely.
ourselves from that particular issue.
Yeah. Difficult to prize a phone, I would think, out of a teenager's hands, particularly at night time when they don't like to go to sleep.
Yeah, and this is
And
where the discipline comes in, isn't it, really?
it's what, sorry?
This is where the discipline comes in because we are parents and we need to do our job in that respect.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Unfortunately, over the years, our values and everything have changed, haven't they? So,
Well, they
uh,
have. I mean, I can remember my children now. They're all grown up and what have you in their late 20s and 30s. But if I was to interfere with my kids' phones, I mean, back then, I'm just trying to think. We're talking almost 13, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't think they had phones back then for them. They might have had, very simple text things. Time ticks on, doesn't it? You forget how recent all this stuff is.
yeah,
And I suppose in a way that's the thing. It is all quite recent. We haven't had these sort of smartphones that long. We've had them long enough, I suppose, to work out that they're not that good at night time and other issues with them that we're now exploring. But as an animal on the planet, I suppose, we've in the last 100 years we've changed what we do as animals so dramatically than what we would have done prior to the last, say, 100 to 200 years ago, when we were more on the land, outdoor life, that sort of thing generally. So
Ev-
it's all a big experiment, really.
everything seems to have speeded up, doesn't it?
Mm,
And that's affecting our natural connection. I've heard you talk about this, back to nature as such, being out there
yes.
amongst the land and enjoying, fresh air. And kids used to enjoy fresh air, didn't they? Used to play on trees and
Well, you couldn't keep them out. I mean, I remember as a kid, again back in the 70s, as I say, carefree days. It seemed you could, you just went running off on your bikes, running into the hills wherever it was, or down at the recreation place. And these days, that's turned on its head. Trying to get kids to go out. Even in the 90s, when my kids were growing up, we've got the downs near where I am, and you say, "Come on, we're going up on the downs." Oh, do we have to? But once they were there, and we'd been up there a few hours, and it's like, well, we've got to get back now for dinner. So, oh, we don't want to go. They didn't want to leave. Once they'd had that time to reconnect, as it were, they
mm,
didn't want to come back because they were enjoying themselves, and all those things that were holding them at home, like sort of early computers and console games and those sort of things, were out the window because they were climbing trees and running about.
yeah, I remember what was it, the ZX45 or something when they first introduced computers to us and everything. They were so basic, really.
Mm.
Little dots on the screen and all this
And
thing.
they lapped them up, though, didn't they?
Yeah, Yeah, but it's much different now, isn't it? And our
Yes.
whole lives revolve around the internet as we're, using now, really.
I know, and this is where it becomes difficult for me because I'm arguing against the very devices and services that I'm using to connect with people and get the messages I want to get out to people. And at the same time, there's that juxtaposition of really actually wanting to be outside and doing stuff. And as the weather now starts to improve and we've got out of winter, I will be taking a halt from a lot of this. I do my monologues, but I don't want to be inside under artificial lights all day long. As much as important as it is, for me, I've got to get my life in order again.
Yeah, yeah. And, so how much sleep do you get yourself?
Well, I would say between 7 and 8 hours generally.
Yeah. And there are sort of optimal times to go to sleep. I mean, I go to sleep around about 10:30. But then I'm up, probably 6 o'clock in the morning, doing all the work for the channel and everything else. And I also do voiceovers for companies and things like that. So I'm quite a busy guy, in that respect.
Yes.
So it's very important that I keep an eye on my stress because of the previous heart attacks that I've had. I've got 3 stents now and had a couple of heart attacks. Um, so, I realize the importance of, like we were talking about sleep, weren't we? That kind of thing. And you were saying about this, some of the stats involved in not sleeping properly. I've got some in front of me here because you've got to look after your health. It's very, very important. There's things called killer cells, isn't there, within your body, and they can be reduced up to 70% if you're not getting the right sleep. And that's quite a shocking figure,
What does a killer cell do?
well, you're talking about, dealing with things like cancer and stuff like that.
Right.
So it confuses your whole body system. Your whole, because you need to know when to sleep and when not to sleep. People wake up with alarms now, don't they? But
Yes.
really, your body should know when to wake up. Um,
Yes. Yes. I mean, I normally wake up before my alarm goes off.
yeah, I don't even have one now.
No.
I've trained myself to wake up at a particular time, which you can do. Because if you're connected, to your natural abilities, you can do that. But people have lost these things, haven't they? So, that's a real problem. Um, you're 300% more likely to get a cold if you've not got sufficient sleep. And that's quite a high percentage as well. So you can see it's quite important to
Mm.
sleep. But if you're stressed out, like we were saying, you're not going to be able to get to sleep at night time.
No. So
Or if the classic thing, isn't it, that people get takeouts and, or take-ins, I should say, and sit there and watch Netflix until the early hours. And then they wonder why they haven't got the energy and all the necessary things the next day.
yes.
That's
No, I absolutely agree that sleep is so important. I mean, for me, I could not operate, and I know when I'm tired and sluggish in the daytime, and I'll think to myself, oh yeah, that's because I did have a broken night, or whatever it is, and I'll be able to work it out that I did stay up too late, and I know myself. And also, some people are better in the morning, aren't they? I mean, I get tired in the evening because I work pretty hard, and
yeah,
then come the evening, I sort of get to the point where other people might be going, oh, well, let's go out or let's do things. And I think to myself, it's the last thing I really want to do. I just want to sort of get into bed, maybe read a book for half an hour, and then, vroom, as you say, 10:30ish, I'm out like a light, and then sort of up and around about by 7 o'clock. I mean, I used to get up at 5, ridiculously, and
I,
do a show.
yeah,
Or I would get up and write.
yeah.
I find I'm much more creative first thing in the morning.
Well, it's actually official that is the time for doing all these things, through the research that's been done. For the majority of people,
Mm.
the morning is the best time. And then you get sluggish, and then between 1 and 3, which is when we're talking now, you've kind of had it,
Yes.
Your
So
brain,
night night.
no more, that's it, have a rest. And that's why cultures, in other cultures, they actually take a break and they go to sleep for a little while.
So is napping good for you?
Well, not necessarily. You should only really nap for about 30 minutes because
Right.
it mucks up your, and I'm going to try and pronounce this now, your circadian rhythms. Okay?
Circadian
Circadian
rhythms.
rhythms. And they're very,
Yeah.
very important. We're getting back to nature again, you see,
Yes.
and how we operate as human beings. And that's been interfered with.
Yes. Because I remember my dad, he must have been about my age, I suppose, when I noticed that he would take a nap after dinner, after lunch, rather.
I think
And,
we on a
and
Sunday, especially.
pardon?
We all did that on a Sunday, didn't we? After the sun.
Yeah, I mean, people would just sort of kick back and have a nap. But I used to think, come on, Dad, where's your energy? I mean, I was a hell of a lot younger, obviously, than my father, and
Yeah.
I saw it as a sign of giving in. And
Mm,
I think sometimes people do see that. I mean, if you think of Margaret Thatcher, allegedly only had 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, but then
yeah.
she ended up with dementia, so that must say something.
Would explain a lot, wouldn't it? Really. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, no,
it
it's
catches up with you in the end.
so important to get that sleep. I saw a YouTuber recently bragging that he only, he's only asleep for a certain length of time, but he really doesn't know where he's taking himself. And like you
No.
say, you don't know what the end result is going to be of that. So it's important to take responsibility, really. It's not being lazy, is it, to sort out your sleep patterns and everything else. And we need to be responsible for ourselves, and not rely upon other people
Hmm.
tell us what to do and all of that kind of thing. So, you
Because
know,
animals inherently know when to sleep, and they'll just flop down and go to sleep
mm,
and wake themselves up when it's right for them. And if they're feeling a bit under the weather, they'll sleep a lot more.
mm, mm,
And but they'll be ready to. I mean, I'm talking about not domestic animals because sometimes they're trapped inside or their life is so different from being in the wild.
right.
And in the way they've been domesticated. I'm just thinking of other animals that they've got enough food. They don't need to do very much. They probably need to reserve their energy,
Yeah.
and yet when danger comes, they've got that energy to escape. And
Not only that, they live in the moment. So they,
right, they're
like we
not
were
planning
saying
anything.
earlier about being anxious. I mean, they do have a certain level of anxiety, but they don't dwell on stuff like we do.
Yes.
So we create our own anxiety, don't we? We get delusional and we literally relive the things that were happening in the past.
So tell us about that living in the moment. How do you bring it on so that you can park your worries and anxieties out the way, so you're no longer worrying? Because it's like, and you wake up in the middle of the night. It's very difficult to live in the moment because you're just lying down, going, "Why can't I go back to sleep?"
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a famous Buddhist story actually about a monk that was cooking the dinner for all the other monks. And he needed a particular implement. So he was looking everywhere for this implement, and he was getting more and more stressed out. In
Mm.
fact, he couldn't find what he wanted. And another monk came in and said, what on earth is going on? What's wrong with you? What are you doing? And he said, oh, I've lost this implement. And the other monk said, well, no, you've lost yourself. That's the point. That's what living in the moment is always being in the moment. You can go on meditation classes, mindfulness, that kind of thing. But really, the effective way is by actually doing that all the time, being in the moment all the time,
Right.
not being distracted. And it's the distractions that will get you into trouble, accidents, that kind of thing. And if you're already sleepy because you've not had enough sleep, and you've got anxiety and all these other things on top, then, this is when we get into accidents. And motorway accidents are mostly caused by people that are sleep deprived. And over 50% of the population is sleep deprived.
And
Which,
and a lot of those are at the wheel of cars at sort of ridiculous speeds.
yeah, so you can see where we're going with that.
Yeah.
Unless you address those things, you're putting your life in danger, quite literally.
Yes.
And also,
Life is organised, though. I mean, almost deliberately so. Let's say that you're your situation can be that you've got to get up early because you've got to commute and you've got to catch a train at a certain time, so you've got an alarm.
Yeah.
And then you head off to wherever your job is. You work there under certain rules and timings, and then you've got to come back. So our whole lives are constructed around a clock in many ways that you can't, sometimes, for example, if I'm working at home, if I'm not doing these sort of things, if I'm working at home and the sun has come out and it's lovely, I'm lucky because I'm self-employed. I will say to myself, I'm just going to sit outside on the step and read for 20 minutes and just take a complete break, rest my eyes. It's warm, get some vitamin D and just reconnect. Now, I don't actually have a garden I have a space where I keep logs, but it's not a proper garden with plants and things. And I would dearly like to find somewhere where that's a little bit more plentiful. But so I can do that, and obviously many other people can do a similar sort of thing, but a lot of people can't because they're, if you walk down into the town and there's people inside shops, and sometimes they're right at the back of the shop underneath fluorescent lights, and they've got stuff in the window, so barely any light comes in, and they're sitting down all day long, and you'd think that's quite restful because they're sitting down, but it seems to me not a. We exist in a world that's not actually natural for us, I suppose. All my ramblings there was trying to get to.
And I could go off into conspiracy theories in that respect and say, maybe this is engineered in some way that really they, whoever they are, they don't want us to be connected to, the nature of us, the humanness of us.
Mm. And well, we're all geared to try and make a profit. That seems to be in the business world. Everyone's trying to make a profit, so we're all encouraged to work harder and longer in order that we can get sufficient things. And of course, we're all geared up to buy the next exciting trinket. Oh, that's nice and shiny. I must have that. And then as soon as you've bought that one, there's another one come out that gives you a little bit extra, and you go, oh, I better work hard so I can get that trinket. And yet, it's not the trinkets that make you happy.
No, and I think we talked earlier on, didn't we, before we started to record here about my near-death experience. So not only have I got my money's worth from the NHS with the heart attacks, but also had a near-death experience. And that really put me in the right place, if that makes sense, mentally. I was able to look at life in a different way.
So tell us how did that come about?
Well, it was basically I went in because I'd had heart attacks, and they were going to test my heart. And what they do is they inject you with a chemical, and then they can see on the computer what your heart's doing, so they can see where it is, and just checking really that everything's okay. And immediately that chemical went in. I disappeared and was gone. And
from what do you mean by that?
Oh, all my organs and everything just shut down. Just had a 1 in so many thousands result, which can happen.
And were you awake when they are injecting this into you?
I was.
You were conscious,
and everything just slowed down. And I wanted to talk, but I couldn't talk. And then I disappeared, but I was still aware, and it was like I was looking, and you hear this often, don't you? It's like I was looking down and watching all these people. It was a bit of a comedy, actually, because they put us in a room where we shouldn't have been because there wasn't enough room.
Right.
They were refurbishing. So they're trying to push me up against a wall, and there's about 11 people working on me, trying to get me back to life. And so, yeah, it was an interesting experience. I won't go into everything about that because it's really quite impossible to put across to people the feelings that you have. All I say to people is it's very comforting, almost sort of warm, if you like, satisfying. And in fact, you don't want to come back.
Right.
That good. But
were you? I mean, the classic thing is that they're hovering around as if it's like in the position of the security camera, like looking down onto the room.
exact thing that happened.
Did you get a feel that you could then drift away somewhere else, or you were just mainly in that room?
Well, no, that's like I say, I felt like I was going somewhere else, and that place was really, really nice.
Hmm.
That's the best way I can put that, because it is difficult to explain it from on a
Yes.
level. But the thing that this is the important thing about it is that I had a sense of human touch. So it's quite an emotional thing for me. So I'll have to
Hmm.
be careful how I talk about this. But that human touch of a nurse's hand is what pulled me back to
Right.
to the living as such. So I learned a lot from that, and also you learn about what's important in life, not like you were saying, the money, and all of the other things, the power maybe that some people would like to have, because after all, none of us get out alive from this situation. We all
Hmm.
end up in the same place wherever it
Yes.
may
And we
be.
can't take all that nonsense that we've been hardly hard working for with us.
I have to be careful that because of all of that situation, that I don't get too lazy, if you like, because things don't really have the same meaning as they did before, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, that does make sense.
Mm.
I mean, I think some of this hits people as they mature because
Oh,
you've
yeah.
been around a bit and you start to become aware that actually the whole thing is a bit of a scam, really, that you're buying a bigger television, and what does that really mean? That you're just
Yeah.
sitting around. And in the end, that television itself, your screen every now and again goes a bit
All right.
funny over here, which is why I've cut back to me.
Yeah.
But
You
the
can imagine, are you? So,
I tend not to edit any of these because I like people to see them as recorded, so that they don't get a feeling that I'm manipulating anything.
I know, yeah.
So I'll just wait for it to come back. Meanwhile, people have to look at my ugly face. So, in as you get older, I feel that you have that begin to sort of realize the rat race that you're on isn't everything, and that eventually, like in the situation I'm in, I'm enjoying doing this, but really and truly, there's that sort of thing. I just want a much more simpler life. To a degree, I want to be left alone by big society. I'm not that worried about. I mean, I've never been somebody who goes to parties and things like that. I've been a bit of a loner. I've been an independent thinker, so I'm not really influenced by, certainly not advertising when they say, "Oh, there's this." But I know people who I'll go into a supermarket with, say, and they'll see all, oh, that's new, I must have it, or that's shiny, oh, I'm tempted by that. Whereas I'm much more mercenary. I've come in here just to get some drain cleaner or something, because I very rarely now buy food from a supermarket. But
Mm.
I'll use things like, bleach and things like that, toothpaste or what have you, non-fluoride ones, ladies and gentlemen, and all of that. So it still has a role for me, but it's amazing how you see people heaping up the stuff, and you think, my goodness, you're going to get through all of that, and then you'll be back next week, and you'll do the same old nonsense. And I'm not talking necessarily about food, but it's being in that moment, I think, is so important, because you're aware that you're alive, and so many people are living their lives through things like television and now these things.
And
They're scrolling and watching and going, oh yeah,
you
cool,
were
look at
saying
that.
also when you're younger, isn't it?
Yeah,
Anyone's younger than I am, I think, sort of thing. When you get older, policemen get very young, don't they? That's
don't they?
the thing.
And more
But
belligerent, and
yeah,
and they talk down to you a lot more.
yeah, and I think your values and your priorities do change, don't they, as you get older and get more mature? Well, hopefully they do.
Mm,
That's the
mm,
situation. But going back to that experience that I had, that certainly was a life shifting thing. And it made me realize what my priorities are. And that is just, I know it sounds cliche, but to help other people. And that's where I'm at. And I've written a book all about stress, anxiety, fear, also the freeze thing, which is really important because what's happened over the past 3 years has put many people into what I would call a state of freeze because you've got, that's part of the overall system that we have.
mm.
Stress, fight, flight, and freeze are the three main things. And a lot of people are kind of still stuck in that mentally, because of what's been going on over the past 3 years. And it's the fear really that generates it. So you need techniques to be able to get out of that. And one of the best techniques you can do is sort of controlling, how your stress is affecting your body. So we're talking about the muscles, the structure, and all of that kind of thing. So you need to have relaxation processes that you can do. So stress and release, so
Yes.
you stress a muscle, you release a muscle, and you work all the way through your body. They do that a lot in yoga. And thankfully, my wife is a yoga teacher. So she's taught me a lot of things, which I also share with other people and pass that on. So techniques like that are really, really important to help release that physical structure, because lots of illnesses can come from a really tight body.
Mm.
Many people that seem to be in this frozen state, and not just physically, but in the mind as well. And the damage that's going to do is quite incredible. So it's important to sort them out.
So how do you free them in the mind then?
It's just a mental process that goes on, because it's part of the original makeup of us as humans. That's what we do. And I'll give you a good example of it actually. Now, in Africa, you've got the lions, which get quite hungry from time to time, don't they?
Well, I imagine they do.
I'm not sure what you would call this. Is it a doe or something, or a buck, isn't it?
Right.
Obviously, they like to chase them. Now, some animals just stand still and they freeze. And I've seen this on video. And the lion goes round the animal and then goes off and leaves it alone. That's
So
what
that,
nature
yeah.
does.
So it's almost as if the animal has said, "Look, I'm just a tree, ignore me," or the animal is going, "There's no fun in the chase here. I need to go and have a bit more, work up an appetite. I'll get another
In,
one."
in a more serious way, people can't understand why some women allow themselves to be raped. I mean, it's quite a serious subject.
Hmm.
They go into this freeze.
Right.
Way of,
It's not just to make this clear. It's not that they are allowing themselves, but
no,
it's not a voluntary thing. I mean,
yeah,
but it is an involuntary natural reaction, and they just sort of kind of leave the body for a minute.
yeah. And so if you've been in constant fear, which we have for quite some time,
Yes.
and develop this freeze process, and that can happen mentally and physically. And you can see the tightness in some people's bodies just by observing that. And that can't be very healthy. So,
No. So I'm just thinking. Sorry to interrupt you there, and I do try not to interrupt, but it's sometimes it's very engaging. With that, we spoke about the 23rd thing, didn't we? With the alarms going off.
yeah,
That's kind of like a little poke, isn't it? In a way, if it was used a lot of time. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the benevolent, lovely government that we've got would possibly use
no, no.
these things. But if you were living under a tyrant government, if
Whatever that is.
whatever that looks like, heaven forbid we'd ever be in that situation. But if this was then utilized regularly, it would, I imagine, stiffen you up, because it would be a continual sort of needling effect.
Pushing the button, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they know which buttons we have, these nefarious people, whoever.
Yes. Yeah, whoever they might be.
But, they know which buttons to push. I mean, you're talking about, a form of psychology, which is very advanced, aren't you? So if that was being used upon us, say, if somebody would want to do that.
Would that come under the neuro-linguistic programming?
Oh, yes.
Could you just explain what that is for those people who don't know?
That's a big story.
Oh, it's a big story. But can you put it into very simple terms?
Yeah, it's basically been going since probably about the 70s. Richard Bandler was the man that created the form of NLP that we have. And what it is a combination of all the best things that you could muster to help people get beyond limitations, behaviors, looking at values. The list is endless of the things which are incorporated. And a lot was learned from a famous hypnotherapist many, many years ago called Erickson. And if you're into hypnotherapy, you'll know who he was, going right back, I think it was the 20s actually.
Right.
And he could cure people of all kinds of problems. Sometimes he would talk to the mother of a daughter that's got an issue. And through the conversation he was having with the mother, the daughter was cured.
Golly.
Yeah. And so that's conversational hypnosis. So I'm very familiar with that because, as I say, I've got a diploma in all of that sort of stuff. So, I know when it's being done to me as well.
Mm.
Really, really important. So these methods can be used as an extreme form of control.
So just to work out the wording there, neuro-linguistic. Neuro is what, the mind, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
And linguistic is language, obviously. So you're using language to manipulate the mind.
Yeah.
But presumably for both, for good, if you're using it for yourself, but also it can be used against you, and you might be unaware of it. Is that right?
That's correct. And so it can be quite dangerous. There is a kind of karma to it, though. If you're very, very good at it, you might attract, say, 3 women, and they never leave you alone.
Right. That would be very awkward.
Yes. So
I couldn't cope with that
in that respect. And I have seen that happen, not to me, but to people that I've known, and they wish that they hadn't gone down that road.
Yes, I can imagine. So would you say that authority could use this on its population?
I suppose you could say it, couldn't you?
I mean, we went through a period a few years ago where messages were being delivered to us on a very repetitive basis.
3 words normally.
Yeah. And very similar to the way that advertising is done on television and on radio and now on the internet, of course.
So it's being done to us all the time, constantly, really, not just, with, say, tyrannical type people. It's being done in our media, it's being done everywhere, but we're not aware of it.
And it's a way of manipulating somebody else, whether that be an individual or a group, to, in a way, I mean, I know the government have, say, a nudge unit. So a nudge unit would want to, say, nudge you for usually beneficial reasons, helpful reasons. But if it wasn't a benevolent government, they might be nudging you to do things which you feel are perfectly normal, but actually you wouldn't necessarily do them if they hadn't nudged you in that direction.
Yeah, but if I said something like, what wouldn't happen if I didn't do that?
What would happen if you didn't do that?
What wouldn't happen if I didn't do that? Now your brain's trying to work out the question, isn't it?
What happens if you didn't do the nudging? What wouldn't happen? They'd get a bit cross with you, wouldn't they?
What wouldn't happen if I didn't do that?
Nothing would happen.
But what wouldn't happen if I didn't do that? Yeah?
I'm still trying to understand.
Well, you're not meant to.
Oh, right. What would happen if you didn't do what they were asking you to?
What would happen if I didn't do that? You see?
Well, nothing would happen. Yeah.
The only reason I said that to you, because I'd be in conversation with you about something or other, which was about that very subject. Mind would then have to go on a search to try and find meaning for what I just said to you. Meanwhile, that opens up your unconscious mind, and it's just ready for me to implant whatever I want to put into it.
Oh, I see.
It
opens the back door, as it were.
Yes.
So you can funnel in stuff that you're not familiar with.
You've gone somewhere else, and you're not here now. You're in a different kind of trance. So
right.
I'm now going to put in my trance that I want. So, I mean, there's so much detail to all this, and that would be a whole kind of...
That's a whole conversation in and of itself.
Yeah.
And hypnosis is part of that, presumably, yes. which is something... Yeah.
Put that in the mix of everything, conversation. You can write in that way as well. You can actually write it on a page and convert people into doing things that maybe they may not have done if they hadn't read what they've been reading. So
hypnosis is about suggestion. You get into a state where you're more open to
There's different
suggestion.
kinds. There are different kinds of hypnosis.
Right. But I'm just thinking in your writing that you've just mentioned there, I'm just thinking you can, in a way, persuasive writing is a sort of form of if you've got an argument and you're putting it over in such a way that everything that the writer is saying is actually agreeable with, that you could follow a logic which you might not ordinarily follow if you were saying, I'm going to get you to jump off this cliff, for example, or I'm going to get you to buy this car. But the logic just takes you on this very easy and gentle journey where you go, wouldn't it be great to do this? And wouldn't it be... And you go, yeah, no, that would be kind. And this would probably be a better way of doing it. Yeah, yeah. And then if you just jump off the cliff, you'll be fine. And you go, do you know what? I'm up for that.
Yeah.
So it could...
It's far more sneakier than that, really.
Is it?
Yes. It's like if you are a car salesman, as you said, you would say, by now, you're finding this car quite comfortable, aren't you? Because you would have already looked at the man or the woman and assumed through looking at how they dress and everything else whether they were kinesthetic people. So you go for the comfort angle of them. If they're more auditory, you talk about the radio in the car. Does that make sense?
Yes. So in other words, you're reading them.
Yes.
You're reading the customer. There you are as the salesman, reading the customer and thinking, okay, this person likes his comfort. So you're then highlighting those areas that are going to appeal to him much more.
Yeah.
There's no point talking about what's under the bonnet if they haven't a clue.
That's right.
Of mechanics.
By now, you'll be finding this really comfortable to sit, wouldn't you? And, by the time we've, or you could say something like, you wouldn't want to pass this by, would you? Because this opportunity is only going to be available for the next week, whatever that opportunity is in relation to the car. And so, don't pass this by if you get a chance. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I've used the word buy 3 times within that sentence. And your unconscious is going buy, buy, buy.
Right. I see. So I see. So you're using words in a different context. It wouldn't pass this by, but actually, don't forget, you could buy the car. Thanks very much.
Yeah. And then you go in and you say, do you want to buy this car?
Yeah.
Buy this car? No, I'm giving you a command.
Right. Oh, I see. So you're saying that the subconscious will pick that up because the conscious is distracted by the 101 other things. But you're actually saying you want to buy this car, and effectively you're saying you will buy this car, and I'm giving you the
out. Slightly. There's either a pause in front of it, or you overemphasize it, or whatever. There's experts that do this far better than I would. Making a real hash of this at the moment because it's
I think you've done it very well, and I subscribe to exactly what you say. In fact, I would be subscribing to more of your stuff. If you'd like to subscribe to my channel, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
So it's important, yes. So it's that using words in a very clever and somewhat manipulative way. I mean, at the end of the day, he's selling a car. That's his job, and it's down to you to work out whether you resist that or not, I suppose. But being aware of it would help if he's saying buy a number of times and then comes out with the statement and all of that. You've frozen again for a moment there. So there's we've covered a lot of stuff about stress and hypnosis and our well-being and all of that on a sort of, I suppose, a mental level.
But did you buy any of it that I was talking about?
Well, I think I've bought into it, definitely. I mean, I think most people would agree that they're probably living in a more stressful situation than they would want to.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what would be the ultimate opposite of being stressful? You can't go through life being totally relaxed. You'd end up a bit like Neil on The Young Ones.
Or you'd be run over by a car.
And you'd be run over by a car, exactly. Or, and that's, chill, man, really chill.
Dylan, was it on the Magic Roundabout?
Yes, exactly, yes, back in the days.
We talked talked about that aspect of it, didn't we? The importance of having some stress in your life, and
Yes.
motivates you, doesn't it, also to do things. And the difference between anxiety and that kind of motivation, that excitement, in
Mm.
relation to the body, there's not much difference. The chemicals you produce and everything, which is quite interesting. So that's why a lot of people go on rides which frighten the life out of you,
Yes.
because of the excitement of that. So it's just not
And
all.
that pumps adrenaline and all sorts of things,
Yeah,
and that can be good. Just as enthusiasm,
yeah,
you can be enthusiastic about something and look forward to something, be excited about something, and so it's not really stress, but
yeah.
you're not just sort of into this sort of couch potato lump going, oh, I'm just not going to worry about anything. Because I think being enthusiastic and full of energy and upbeat is, raising your vibrations and keeping you positive, obviously is a good thing. I mean, it goes
Mm.
without saying, presumably, although
And
I've just
things
said
like
it.
laughter is good,
Yes.
to combat stress and anxiety.
And
A
it's a good release as well, isn't it?
seeing a good comedy on the TV, or actually laughing yourself. They've got a thing called laughter yoga, haven't they? And all this kind of thing. All seems a bit strange.
Yeah.
It's been proven, by whoever it is that does this research, that laughter does do a lot of good. So even standing in the line to go and watch a funny movie, they've measured that people's overall structure and everything changes for the
Right.
better
In the
by being
anticipation
in the
of it.
queue.
Yeah.
Because they're preempting this situation that they're going to go to. So
So
laugh.
look, a lot of what we've been discussing, I suppose some people might sit and watch this and just say, "Oh, well, I kind of know this. You need to have more sleep, and you've got to look after your food, and laughter is good for you, and all the stuff that we've said."
Yeah,
But I imagine that half the times we don't know that we are actually tensed up, because sometimes you can suddenly realize, oh, my back has, or I'm all knotted, I must have got stressed. And although we know all this sort of in a ethereal way, that we know we shouldn't be doing this, and yet we break all those rules that we might make for ourselves, and then we do get ourselves a bit, but we're not really honest with ourselves and say, do you know, I've really got to stop doing all this, because we allow it to carry on because we've survived in a way.
yeah. This is when things like exercise, especially things like yoga, tai chi, that kind of thing, can be
Hmm.
beneficial because you're releasing all that tension that you've got in your body in a good way.
Yeah.
Some people go jogging and things like that, but that can cause problems though in itself. So you don't want to overdo that, because you'll end up going to see the doctor and be out of action because maybe you've damaged yourself in some way. So, you know, to think about the kind of exercise that suits you,
Hmm.
what you're capable of doing. But exercise is a big thing to release stress as well.
And
So, say living in the moment, um, doing exercise, but also the relaxation as well. So it's the two ends of the scale, isn't it, that you need to address?
breathing.
Breathing, yeah, and yoga again. You see the breathing technique, and so there's one really easy technique which I can actually teach you in about 3 minutes.
Go on in.
You can do at home, and they're going to get an instant benefit from that. Yeah, should we do that?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do that to finish our conversation,
Yes, yes.
which would be
I've got
fantastic.
these here. I don't know whether you can see that. Is that?
Yeah, I'll put you on the full screen. Bear with me. There we go. Breathe for 5 minutes. Hold for 5. Breathe out for 5. And did I say for 5 minutes? Breathe in for 5 breaths.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just.
Hold for 5, breathe out for 5, and then hold for 5. Okay, yeah. So that's very simplistic and easy to understand.
To get the angle
Yeah.
here, but yeah. So if you want to try that very quickly, Richard.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. I'll put myself back on the screen so they can watch the idiot taking part here. So
Yeah,
here we go. Yeah. And so
and
these are what, 5 seconds, shall we say?
if you've got high blood pressure and things like that, then you should always consult a doctor before you do these kinds of techniques.
Yes, that's it. So breathe in for 5 seconds. We'll assume that is.
Breathe
So
in.
here we go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold that breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think you get the idea. Yeah,
I'm holding now for 5.
got that.
Just holding it.
Yeah, you can breathe out now, Richard. Yeah,
I
but
breathed out. I was holding it.
what you can do to add to this, because it's about meditation as well, remember, is imagine a box. Okay, so you close your eyes and you imagine this box.
Mm.
Imagine that you're tracing that box with your finger as you're doing the counting as well. Yeah,
Right.
the idea?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very simple. And that can, especially say, you're in a moment of stress, a sudden stress. Maybe you've had a phone call, something like that.
Yes.
You need to have that instant, taking the stress away in that instant. And just to do that, just take a moment out and do that, could stop all kinds of things happening in your body, which is really, really important. So you're
Yeah.
balancing your whole system, and coming away from your natural reaction would be all the adrenaline and everything else, which is going to be damaging to your body.
Yeah. And we often are given bad news from all sorts of different things. And like we were saying, if you were worried about the messages coming from wherever, you can instead of starting to immediately panic, just go into that very gentle box breathing, as you say. Okay, that's interesting. Just bear with me.
Do it on a regular basis, and that way you don't really have to work that hard at doing it. It's just something you naturally fall into. It becomes a pattern, whereas your pattern is normally getting freaked out and getting stressed. Taking control of that pattern.
Yes, absolutely. That makes.
There's so many things I could share with you in that respect, and
So,
making contact also with your body, touching your heart, closing your eyes, breathing deeply. If you do that often enough, then when stress comes, you touch your chest, and in the end, the rest follows.
yeah.
You don't really have to think about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of like a little reminder trigger.
Yeah.
It's like a pattern. When I do this and I follow this routine, in the end, it becomes you're not thinking of it. It's another sort of habit that you've just.
And NLP teaches you all these sorts of things, and you actually then own your triggers, and you can also do fingers. You can, what you do is I won't do this now because it's a hell of a long thing. You develop a trigger on your fingers, okay, by getting, one finger would represent a memory, when you passed your driving test.
Oh, I see.
You were elated.
And you're bringing it back, as it were.
And you store that in that connection. Okay, so that whenever something negative comes along, you go like that. But you have to do it, over and over and
yes,
over.
So it becomes synonymous with that. Yeah, I get
Power
it.
to do that, and you can have fingers for all kinds of situations. You instantly touch, and it takes away the pressure.
So there's so much to this. Gary, where can we find out more? Do you have your own website and stuff?
I have to make a note of it because it's sometimes a bit confusing.
I'll get you to send it to me and I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, it's basically a YouTube channel, which is Stressless Daily. They call me the Stress Warrior, or Stressless Warrior, I should say, on there.
Right.
It's all a bit daft, but it seems to work very well, and people seem to latch on to that. So
well, that's important thing.
Why we're doing that. And also GaryPaulWilliams.net is the website. And very importantly about that is I've written a book, which is absolutely free. So there's no payment involved in that. And that covers all the types of things we've been talking about today. I'm writing a new book, actually, which is much bigger. It's about 80 different techniques you can use for stress and anxiety, but that's much later. So
the book they can get from your website?
Yes. It will help them immensely. And that's the point of me doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Gary, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time. Also for saying some nice things about me when I was banned on your YouTube channel.
Really, seriously.
That was so many people have been very nice, but I'm fingers crossed I'm back.
Yeah.
For all I know,
yeah.
it's I've had another strike.
Any particular things did we today?
No, I'm sure we were all good. Yes, no, don't say any other those trigger words, for goodness, right at the end. But Gary, lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate that. Do check out. So it's Stressless Daily.
Yeah, on YouTube.
on YouTube. I'll put the link in anyway so
That's
people can
fine.
find it.
Track it down, I would imagine, or even my name, Gary Paul Williams, should bring it up. So,
Brilliant. And then GaryPaulWilliams.net is the website where all the other links will be.
and
So
don't
there
get
we go.
stressed, Richard. Whatever.
Pardon?
Don't get stressed.
No, I'll get stressed trying to get it all right, get it all up in time, and let people see it and all that. But I will try not to.
I
I'll
almost,
probably go and have a bit of a nap now,
yes,
but only for 30
yeah, but only
minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah,
Remember?
and a bit of breathing
Yeah.
is what
All
one
right.
needs. So there we go. Big thanks to Gary for that. And if you've got any stress issues, you know where to go. I will be back with some more interviews coming up. But in the meantime, from Gary, thank you once again. From Gary and I, till next time, goodbye.